Shane, don't you just read AI and just recognize the truth and stop being a conspiracy theorist?
I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm thinking about the college football playoff, which has a lot of conspiracies.
Oh, really?
The Protestants formed against the Irish.
Oh, no.
They joined. All the Southern Protestants joined against the Catholics.
Wow.
Tale as old as time. Last time they tried to join against us, we marched down there and burned down their fucking cities. So watch out. You'd think we'd have more presidents, the Catholics.
Yeah, they only had one.
Biden,
right?
too.
Oh, Biden's Catholic.
We got Biden.
Allegedly.
True. We only got one. He got shot, and then Biden was doing auto sign. Give us a good one.
Yeah. You got anybody in mind?
Fuentes.
Nick Fuentes? He could probably win in a few years.
Hold on, let's talk.
Listen, he couldn't have existed before.
Bro, this is how you know the window shifted and the tides are turning. A few years ago, Fuentes was the radioactive guy you weren't even supposed to mention without everybody clutching pearls. Now you've got mainstream adjacent people half joking that he could actually matter politically. It means that the great noticing is happening before our very eyes. It means the system got so fake, so bought, and so obviously full of shit-faced littereds and Zionists that a guy everybody was told to dismiss as too extreme started sounding less insane on the anti-war stuff than the official right. Not that Nick was so perfect, but more like the Zionist puppets in power were so cowardly, so dishonest, and so addicted to kissing Israel's ass that they made the band guy look like the only one willing to say, bro, maybe don't vaporize Iran for another foreign policy hobby who supports slurping on Gorham children.
None of these people can vote for Trump. I'm calling on Catholics, anti-war supporters, immigration restrictionists, and MAGA loyalists to stay home and not vote for Trump. And if we go forward with any operations with Groyper War II, from now on, that is the goal. At one point, it was to get Trump's attention. Going forward, it's going to be to get people not to vote, period. In my opinion, if you're a Catholic, you can't vote for Trump. You cannot vote for somebody who is now frequently supporting abortion rights. Frequently. It seems like every week he supports abortion. Catholics should not support Trump. If you are anti-war, you cannot support Trump. Trump is the World War III candidate. Trump is talking about wiping Iran off the map. That's where the war is going to go nuclear, not Ukraine. You can't vote for Trump. If you're an immigration restrictionist, you can't vote for Trump. They're not deporting any illegals. Okay, that's not happening. They admitted as much. And they're going to bring in more legal immigrants than ever before. And if you think there's some silver lining that we're going to get jobs in the Trump admin, maybe it's bad, but we're going to get in and fix it, think again. Because the personnel are going to be controlled by Jared Kushner.
I didn't even vote for Trump, but I put that tweet
Who'd you
out.
vote for?
I didn't vote at all. I just recused myself. But that's just what makes it ironic, because I became in some ways emblematic of the election, even though I didn't participate. But so it got 100 million impressions on Twitter, and people were saying on the news that kids were saying it in school.
This is one of the clips that aged best, and that's what makes it so funny. Everybody on the right was doing the usual boomer fantasy. Trump as peace guy, Trump as anti-war savior, Trump as the one who would keep us out of another Middle East meat grinder. And Fuentes was basically saying, bro, are you people blind? If you're anti-war, how the hell are you backing a guy who keeps talking tough on Iran and surrounding himself with the same Israel first Zionist swamp creatures that love slurping on our children? That was the real split in my opinion. Not left versus right, not MAGA versus libs. It was, are you actually anti-war or are you just anti-war? Until Netanyahu snaps his fingers. Nick was willing to call the bluff before it was socially safe, and he paid a heavy price for it. Everybody else was still doing that soft little trust the plan routine like retards in red hats.
So I'm driving to Christmas Eve Mass with my family, and I see on Twitter the notification comes up, Ben Shapiro quote tweets me, calling me an anti-Semite. And I was like, what is this? Like, why is this guy attacking me? You know, because I don't have a platform at this time. I'm not an influential guy or anything. And so then I put out another tweet similar. I said something like, if you're China first, you should live in China. If you're Mexico first, you should live in Mexico. If you're Israel first, maybe you should go live in Israel. And again, he quote tweets me and says, you're an anti-Semite.
That same night?
This was, I think, a couple weeks later. Happened a little bit further down the line. And so...
Were you surprised that he knew you were?
Yeah, I was. I was surprised at why he cared.
If you're Israel first, maybe you should go live in Israel. Bro, this is such a clean line from the Nick man because it cuts through 10 layers of fake conservative bullshit in one shot that has been fed to us like goy slop these past 40 years. America First is supposed to mean something, or at least it used to, before half the movement turned into unpaid interns for a foreign government, the second the Middle East comes up. If every time there's a conflict, your instinct is not what helps Americans, but how do we serve Israel's priorities? Then stop with the flag-waving cosplay. You're not America First, you're just a little errand boy for a different set of interests. That's why this line hit so hard, because it forced people to choose. Either America First means something, or it's just bumper sticker theater for gullible dads and podcast morons. And way too many people on the right expose themselves, right there for being the cowardly goyim boomers that they are.
So it sounds like your, not to put words in your mouth, but your life experience has left you so stung by the Republican establishment, you don't trust anybody, it sounds like.
Well, no, I mean, these people attacked me when the rules were different, and now they got better, and now I'm good with them. I mean, I'm willing to be good with them, but I think that I don't know if Marjorie still has a problem with me or not.
I don't know.
And I want to say a very special thank you to Milo Yiannopoulos for making this happen. He made this happen. He put it together. Whoops. That's Milo over there. He's throwing some stuff around. But thanks to him, we are honored, we are humbled and excited to welcome to the stage right now for our first speech, and we love to get to know her much better. I think this is going to be the beginning of something great. The representative from Georgia, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Well, hello, canceled Americans.
A couple of years ago, Nick even had the Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene on in order to further the alliances for the America First movement, but she denounced Nick the next week. Just another example of the boomers that are in Congress who could not even wipe their own ass without assistance.
I have got to hit the airport, but I'm glad to talk to you about this. I do not know Nick Fuentes. I've never heard him speak. I've never seen a video. I don't know what his views are, so I'm not blind with anything that may be controversial. What I can tell you is I went to his event last night to address his very large following, because that is it's a very young following, and it's a generation I'm extremely concerned about.
It's a white nationalist.
Excuse me a minute. I'll tell you exactly why I went. I went to talk to them about America First policies, and I talked to them about what's important for our country going forward. Now, in regards to Russia, Putin is a murderer, and he should have never invaded Ukraine.
You're talking about lowering the rhetoric, which is important for everybody to hear from you and all of our elected officials. But there is some concern, a lot of concern among Republicans about the rise of anti-Semitic hard-right figures in your movement, especially after Tucker Carlson hosted white nationalist Nick Fuentes on his podcast, didn't question Fuentes about his vile language or views. You did speak at a conference hosted by Fuentes back in 2022. You were criticized, and you said then that you didn't know about his views. Well, Fuentes talked to Carlson about that in the interview. Listen to what he said.
My name is Marjorie Taylor Greene. I am the daughter of the King, the one true living God, the Alpha, the Omega, our Father in heaven, and I am a forgiven sinner, washed in the blood of our Savior, Jesus Christ.
What do you say to that?
Well, first of all, I defend every single person's free speech rights. I think that's incredibly important. So I don't apologize for that.
I do know, though, and this is the last criticism I will level, and this maybe not even your fault, but I do know that, the coordinated attacks against totally reasonable questions about what's in America's interest and what's not, those are all coordinated by the Israeli government. It's all come to light now. And they're against me. I've always thought I have the world's most moderate position on Israel. Don't hate Israel. Just don't want to get involved in their wars. Don't want to pay for this. Don't want to pay for abortion on demand in a foreign country. Sorry. When we're cutting food stamps on our own, that's outrageous. It's not America First. That's my view. Not embarrassed of it at all. They are totally determined to take me out, I think because I'm reasonable. Who would disagree with that? and call me all these names, the most dangerous anti-Semite. I'm not even an anti-Semite.
Coordinated attacks, all coordinated by the Israeli government. / I don't hate Israel, I just don't want to pay for their wars. This is probably the strongest framing clip in the whole compilation, because it's actually saying more than people realize. That's what makes the backlash so revealing, and why I hope Israel will be expelled from our government in the near future. Nick and Tucker are even saying some cartoon villain shit here. He's basically saying the most normal position in the world. I don't hate Israel, I just don't want to get dragged into their wars, I don't want to pay for it, and I don't want America's politics getting bent around a foreign state's priorities. Bro, that should be the easiest stance to defend in the country. But the minute you say that out loud, the whole machine lights up and suddenly you're the most dangerous man alive. Why? Because that one sentence threatens the whole scam that the Zionists have set up in our government. Once people realize you don't have to hate Israel to not want to die for it, the spell breaks. And a lot of the official right has spent years making sure that sentence never lands too cleanly.
On Iran, for example, I remember when they launched the war, everybody obviously said, well, what happened to no new wars? And is this not literally identical to Iraq? It's this question about WMDs and they're killing the protesters and, you know, we're going to do regime change and make it a democracy. Like, very similar in many ways, especially how it played out in the lead up to the war. And everybody obviously recognizes that's a deep, fundamental betrayal of Trumpism, which was always about bringing the troops home from Iraq and Afghanistan, putting America first, the rest of it. And I remember what the Republicans said on Twitter is, well, Trump always said we were going to war with Iran because he said they should never have a nuclear weapon.
Yeah. This is my view, and that's not necessarily your fault, but because they're like, Fuentes discredits the reasonable people because he's always banging on about the Jews. And so he makes everyone else look like a Nazi. And so it's like he's playing a pretty valuable role in the same way that Israel has always funded extremism throughout the Middle East, including Hamas, because it discredits the reasonable people. That's a fact.
Yeah. I would just say I disagree. I mean, you know, because you said the other day, they like me. I don't know what you're talking about when you say that because,
I don't know.
Let me just kind of rebut that.
Well, by the way, I'm not saying you have anything to do with this. I'm just saying I've noticed the phenomenon.
Totally. And I just reject that because they have been messing with me for my entire adult life. I mean,
the ADL.
The ADL got me banned on YouTube. The SPLC posted my house on their website.
What do you mean posted your house?
They posted a photo of my house on their website.
How can they do that?
I guess that's a free speech thing.
The SPLC posted a picture of your house on their website?
Yes.
When?
In 2022.
But I do remember what caught me off guard, you saying that Kamala Harris was a better choice. And I remember part of what you said was because Trump, if he's elected, legitimizes the system. And that would be worse. You didn't want Trump to be elected because it would legitimize the system. Explain what you meant by that, because that sounds to me like you want to delegitimize and almost revolution instead of Trump.
Well, and here's the thing. I think that Trump is obviously the better president if you're just taking like all the nominal figures, like fewer illegal immigrants, he secured the border, the economy's going to be better, the government's going to be more efficient. Like, so, I mean, we're in agreement on that. Here's the problem. And I try to make people think about it in these terms. It's sure. And I don't want this to sound like a cop-out, but I'm trying to get people to think, which is that
right. Trump
gets elected, and let's think about what happens on day number 2. Whereas in 2020, everybody said the election is rigged. Like 86% of Republicans said, oh, the election was BS. Now,
it was close to half of Democrats too, I think.
Yeah, it was substantial. It was across the board. Now nobody believes that. And whereas at one time people believed like, oh, like the system really needs to be overthrown. Like we really need radical change. Now they're saying, oh, Trump won. Oh, I feel relieved. Now we're okay. And look at the things that Trump has done. And we're going to get in, I can tell we're going to get into some of these things. The Epstein files, bombing Iran. And I'm not gish-galloping, I'm just giving a little list of things I don't like. The H-1B visas, the 600,000 Chinese students. Yeah. All these things happen. And because they're happening under Trump, he is legitimizing them. And he's legitimizing the moneyed interests that are responsible for them. And I do think that deflates a lot of the fervor for change that existed before. And I just think sometimes, you know, is that necessarily better in the long term? I don't disagree that Trump is, you know, there's a very big pragmatic benefit, but in the long term, I worry about that.
And that was kind of the mission, was to say, no, the immovable standard is America first. I'm going to represent it, and the conservative movement is going to have to move to me. I will not move towards them. And I thought, maybe I'll make money and maybe I won't, but I'm going to try it for a couple of years and I'll see how it goes.
So, but the sight picture in your head was enemy is conservative movement.
Yes.
This is a nasty little moment because it reveals the game from both sides. The establishment right loves pretending guys like Fuentes are just some random embarrassment who makes everyone else look bad. But the deeper point being argued here is uglier. Systems of power often benefit from having loud, radioactive figures around, because then they can dodge the cleaner criticism. And the Hamas point matters because it breaks the kindergarten version of the story. The same people who cry moral clarity 24/7 helped create the conditions they now use as a permanent excuse, and contributes directly to the ongoing civil war behind the scenes. That's why this section matters. Not because every wild figure is automatically useful, but because look at the crazy guy is one of the oldest tricks in the book. You use the controversial figure as a human scarecrow, so nobody has to answer the actual point. Israel, Zionist pedos, its lobby, and its defenders on the American right have been lying, manipulating, and guilt-tripping their way through every serious discussion for years.
We're going to start with our featured story and talk about this big scandal with the Trump campaign right now. Don't say I didn't warn you. I am absolutely 100% vindicated. I don't know why anybody ever doubts me. I mean, I kind of know why, because I'm a little obnoxious, a little colorful. But I'm basically always right. Okay? Like, I'm almost always right about everything. And this is no different. So I've been very critical of Donald Trump lately. As you know, nobody can doubt that because I've been attacked for it for a while. And I want to frame it this way. I like Trump. I love Trump as a guy. And you know that I've been a participant in and a supporter of the Trump movement for almost 10 years, since I was a teenager. And I've been there, so I've earned the right to say that. I was knocking on doors in 2016. I was a major organizer for Stop the Steal in 2020. I, contrary to what people say, suffered many consequences for my presence at January 6th. I got investigated by the FBI. I got put on a no-fly list. I had my money frozen. I got subpoenaed. I paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. I got censored. I lost probably 2 or 3 years worth of income.
I know who I am. I had a very firm grounding of what I'm about, which is that I was deeply Catholic, and I still am, deeply patriotic and pro-American, and I don't consider myself temperamentally to be an angry or a hateful person. So I never, in other words, lost my center. You know, they say this thing about you look into the abyss and the abyss stares back into you. That never really happened to me. I was frustrated. I was frustrated because I felt like I was being denied a level playing field, opportunity, and it wasn't fair. I felt like I was right, and these people that were basically hypocrites, grifters, not really conservative, they were controlling the conversation, and as a consequence, they were controlling the Republican movement. And I really perceive this as like an urgent crisis.
And as a decades-long supporter of the Trump movement, several weeks ago after Trump's conviction in Manhattan, I said to the Trump movement and to my movement, which is distinct but similar, that we have to have a little reality check. This Donald Trump campaign, like the Donald Trump campaign in 2020, is very different from the Donald Trump campaign in 2016. I am not a never Trumper. I will never be a never Trumper. I'm not anti-Trump. I don't think I'll ever be anti-Trump, so long as he doesn't go too far off the rails. I have been around a long time, from the beginning. I know all the relevant players, and the ones that I don't know, I know of them, and I know a lot about them. And as somebody with inside information and with time in this thing and observing it for a long time, I have to say that this is no longer something that I can get behind. I'm not necessarily against it. I don't think I would argue that it's preferable to have a Biden presidency or that anybody should vote for Joe Biden or anything like that. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a leftist. I'm not a liberal. I'm illiberal. I'm right-wing, although I wouldn't call myself a Republican. And so I guess it might make sense to say I'm just not enthusiastic about Trump in 24. It's not that I'm against Trump. I'm just indifferent to Trump. I can't force myself to get on this show and do a pep rally for Trump, because what I see behind the scenes and what I see in front of the scenes is not entirely consistent with what I believe. And what I believe are the two most important issues of our time. It's really one issue, and that central issue is American sovereignty. It's the idea that Americans are in control of the destiny of America. And people might say, well, who else would have control? Well, who else other than the Americans? Foreign governments, multinational corporations, a transnational elite. Those are all broad categories of people that would control the destiny of America that are not, in a true sense, grounded in America.
Bro, this is such a killer clip because it's pure hypocrisy with the mask ripped off. It's like catching Jeffrey Epstein planting his seed balls deep into Trump's ass. The entire foreign policy class talks like every country on earth has to live under a microscope. Inspections, disclosures, treaties, enforcement, lectures, consequences. But then there's Israel. Nuclear weapons, strategic ambiguity. Everybody knows, nobody says it too loudly. And the same people screaming about rules-based order suddenly become Helen Keller. It's not even some fringe theory. It's just the most obvious double standard in the world. And once you see that, the whole Iran panic starts looking different too. Because now it's not non-proliferation, it's our clients get exceptions, our enemies get sermons. That's the part polite conservatives never want to touch. They'd rather die in a trench than admit the global rules are fake and enforced like a mob racket.
And then the other thing they said was, well, he said no forever wars. And the real forever war is the war Iran has been waging on us, and we're putting an end to it.
Military, and ideally we don't have to use it. You know, we had no wars, 4 years we had no wars, except we defeated ISIS. We defeated ISIS in record time, but we had no wars. They said, he will start a war. I'm not going to start a war. I'm going to stop wars.
And you go, yeah, that really stretches the bounds of what anybody could credibly believe, you know, in good faith. And so that was something that came up in the debate, and you just go, yeah, no, you're kind of missing the point here. Like, if he campaigned on we're going to bomb Iran for regime change for years in a war of choice, I don't think anybody'd be lining up to vote for that. He said no new wars, and now they want to introduce this technicality to kind of get out of it.
It was in the Washington Post today. A group of 20 Democrats in the House of Representatives have written a letter to the White House demanding that this Trump administration disclose that Israel maintains a nuclear arsenal. And this is a huge deal. For those that don't know, Israel is a nuclear-armed country. I think everybody knows this at this point. There's only about a dozen nuclear-armed countries in the world, and you probably know them. It's the US, Russia, China, France, the United Kingdom, India, Pakistan, North Korea, and Israel. But the difference is, unlike all these other countries, every other country in the world discloses and acknowledges that they have nuclear weapons. We know that France has nuclear weapons because they have declared them. We know that Russia has nuclear weapons because they have declared them. And so everybody knows what everybody has. The one country that this does not apply to is Israel.
With the people behind me saying, like in 2024, I said, I'm not going to vote for Trump unless he promises explicitly no war with Iran and we're going to get an immigration moratorium. And I felt like we were taking our own side as the voters, as the base, as the America First Republicans, and saying our vote is conditional. We have this set of demands. And it feels like these other influencers, like you say, like a Benny Johnson, a Steven Crowder, etc., they're facing us with their back to the party. Yeah. And everything the administration does, their job is to sell it to us so that we are prepared to go out and vote in the midterms, vote in the next cycle, whatever. And so it does just become like you are a regime apologist. That's actually your job. You don't even necessarily have an ideology.
The United States
has never acknowledged that Israel has a nuclear weapons program, and this has been a matter of policy since the Nixon administration. President Nixon and Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir came to a secret agreement in the late 1960s that the United States would effectively participate in Israel's strategic ambiguity, meaning Israel would never declare its nuclear weapons program, and we would never snitch. We would never acknowledge that they have nuclear weapons, even though everybody knows that they do, and we know that they do. We won't talk about it. And why is that the case? Well, Israel does not want to declare their nuclear arsenal because they want something called strategic ambiguity. They want their neighbors and their rivals in the Middle East not to know whether they have nuclear weapons or how many nuclear weapons they have or where they are or how they can deliver them. And why would that be beneficial for Israel to maintain this ambiguity? So that all these other countries would be a little bit more careful. A nuclear country realistically cannot lose a war. And it doesn't mean that they literally can't lose. It means you don't want them to lose a war. Because if a nuclear country loses a war or is at risk of losing a total war against a non-nuclear country, well, the nuclear country will use its nukes. So let's say, for example, that Syria and Egypt invade Israel, and Israel fears that it might lose the war and become occupied and maybe erased from the map. Well, then Israel will use their weapon of last resort and they will just nuke Egypt and Syria.
This is maybe the cleanest Vindication clip of all, because it cuts through the lazy fox brain framing that has brainwashed our boomer parents. The war with Iran is not some random isolated event that dropped out of the sky because evil just appeared one day. It's tied into decades of U.S. policy, regional destabilization, oil, alliances, regime change habits. And yes, the fact that Israel's priorities sit right in the middle of all of it, whether people want to say that out loud or not. That's why the great allies there line is so revealing. Bro, there it is. They'll spend hours dressing it up, in think tank language. But when the guard drops for a second, you hear the real thing. We keep doing this because of the same allies, the same habits, the same pressure, the same strategic obsessions. And then people act shocked when somebody like Fuentes says, the America First movement got hijacked by people who care more about foreign clients than their own voters. Bro, all these fake America First boomers spent years acting like Trump was the peace president, and Fuentes was one of the few guys saying, "Are you blind?" The second Israel wanted smoke with Iran, half the right turned into obedient little errand boys for a foreign policy they'd be calling treason if any other country was involved.
That's the standard that we do need to use here, because you said Kamala Harris would be a better choice. I'm not saying it's better than nothing, good enough. I mean, you're talking to Dan Crenshaw. Will never be back on this show because I called him to task on the TAPS Act. I was like, well, how is this not red flag laws? No, there's no one who likes those in positions of authority who betray their base. And I think that base, by the way, is a pretty big coalition. It includes conservative. It's bigger than ever with Donald Trump. Donald Trump isn't really a classical conservative. I think it's better than Kamala Harris. And I can't think of anyone less America first than who you suggested, Ro Khanna. That's why I bring it up. That's why, because
you're getting hung up on that.
Okay, so any member of the Democrat Party. I can't think of anyone less America first than the current Democrat Party. Republicans are flawed. I believe that, go through it, Warren, Kamala Harris, who you said would be a better choice, Gavin Newsom, Whitmer. I believe they fundamentally hate everything about America. I can't name one thing.
I'm not talking, Ro Khanna, I'm not talking about him specifically. And like I said,
Okay.
I'm not even talking about Thomas Massie. I'm using them as an example, as a model. Well, as a model, because as sort of a proof of concept, because you have a Republican and a Democrat who, by the way, I don't even agree with them on most things. Like, I criticize Thomas Massie a lot. But it's an example of bipartisanship on a populist issue, an anti-elite issue that everybody supports. And who is against it? The Republican establishment. Trump, Johnson. And I'm saying that's an example of cooperation where the right can maybe lean into these issues that, you know, maybe they're nonpartisan issues and rally everybody against the establishment in our own party. And it's just, to me, that's always the disconnect, is you want to talk about Kamala Harris and Ro Khanna. And I'm saying, let's imagine a different scenario.
No, I'm not. I don't want to talk about them. You brought them up, and repeatedly so.
You brought them up. let's be honest, the war in Iran is not like some isolated event. People are trying to analyze and they say, well, it's about energy dominance with China. Venezuela and Iran are part of this. We're boxing China in so they don't get their oil.
We don't need oil. We have all the oil we need for ourselves. It's one of the great assets that we have. We have more than double what anybody else in terms of oil production. We're at more than double any other country. So we don't need it, but we did it. It's almost, you could say we did it out of habit, which is not a good thing to do. But we did it because we have some good allies there. We have some great Middle Eastern countries there, Israel there. So we did it for a lot of reasons.
And, without even getting too much into that, it's complete context denial, which is that we've been conducting a foreign policy for 30 years where we systematically went into Iraq, Syria, Libya, Iran, all these countries to decimate them. And it actually doesn't fit a very clear through line or a narrative for American interest. You had all these different arguments. It's about spreading democracy. It's about chemical weapons. It's about nuclear weapons. The clear through line is these are all adversaries of Israel. This is part of their plan to terraform the Middle East in such a way where they have no rivals. And this is, by the way, what they wanted and that no other president gave them. They wanted it under Bush, Obama, Trump. They tried to get it even under Biden when they provoked Iran a couple of times in 2024. And Trump finally gave them, the ideological neocons and Israel, what they've been wanting basically for 50 years, ever since the Islamic Revolution. And so you say, like, not only did you not deliver America first, but you repudiated America first with your allegiance to the biggest threat to it. And all these people are acting like, oh, well, so what? It's not a big deal. It's only 2 weeks. It's only 30 days. It's only 15 casualties. And you say that's ignoring the bigger picture. He changed sides, like he's with the enemy, giving them everything they ever wanted.
Bro, this is where the whole fake populist shell starts cracking. MAGA wants the hat, the rally, the boomer fantasy, the trust the plan nonsense. America first, and the way Nick means it, is supposed to be the anti-war split from that. That's the whole beef. Not right versus left. Not Republicans versus Democrats. It's whether you actually mean America first, or whether you're just another red hat errand boy waiting to be activated the second Israel wants something. That's why this section hits, because once the Iran war gets put back in context, the Trump movement starts looking less like nationalist rebellion and more like a bargain bin delivery system for the same old foreign policy filth.
Look, I feel like even when me and you have these discussions, sometimes I feel like we're talking past each other, and sometimes there'll be. I've felt that way a couple times when you've like responded to things in our ceasefire, in our loosely held. And our ceasefire has held for the years. It was tested a few times. Where I feel like we're talking past each other. But like with these guys, I'm just like, what are you even saying? They're like, it's no. You keep saying it's Israel lobby. It's the Jews. He said at one point to me, he goes, I think it was him, maybe it was someone else. But they go, now see, you blame the government of Israel and the Israel lobby, but you don't blame the real culprit, which is Jewish supremacy. And I thought, okay, so like when someone says, oh, it's Israel, no, it's the Jews. It's just like, well, what do we mean? Like, what exactly are we saying here? And when you say it's Jewish supremacy, I mean, I go, look, Jewish supremacy is certainly a thing. There's really no denying. Go listen to some interviews with some settlers in the West Bank and like, yeah, okay. So like, there's no question that's real. You look at some of the Epstein emails, you could say he certainly had it. That is a real thing. I'm not denying that at all. If you're a Christian, then you kind of inherently believe that you have it right and other people have it wrong, and that they're kind of going to face some consequences for having it wrong. And you're
Jesus of Nazareth was the same way, right? Never wrote anything.
I thought he was a carpenter.
And so, like, but there's also, like, you could have a healthy amount of it where you're not looking at other people like they're animals or like they don't have. Now, when it gets to a level like a settler on the West Bank who's going, no, these are animals. And the idea of discussing Palestinians having rights is like if someone were to tell me or you that, like, this rabbit has rights. You're like, what are you talking about? This is, like, ridiculous. Okay, that's a really big problem. However, to say it's not about Israel or the Israel lobby, it's about Jewish supremacy, feels a lot to me like a kind of a left winger, like going like, well, no, the problem isn't any of these policies, it's racism.
Look at how greasy this gets the second people try to deny the chain of events. Bro, it's not about Israel. Yeah? Then why does it somehow always bend back toward Israel's priorities the second the missiles come out? That's the pattern. That's the point. And this is where the America First versus MAGA split matters again. MAGA guys love sounding tough until the foreign policy gets embarrassing. Then they turn into little spreadsheet clerks for empire. America First, at least in this lane, is saying, no, I actually don't want Americans dragged into another Middle East blood ritual, because some foreign client is nervous. That's the difference. One side does slogans. The other side at least claims to follow the consequences.
What I would say, because I always disagreed with him, he would always say, the fucking problem's Jewish supremacy, and like, they can't even find the words for it. They can't even find like the right, conceptually they don't fully understand it. And so he would always go back to, if you watch any interview, it's the same speech. Well, in their fucking Talmud, it says that, fucking blah, 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 and that's why Israel wants to kill everybody and whatever. And it's like, yeah, I know that article that you're talking about, and I kind of know the premise. And I would say that, what makes Judaism different is that, one, it's an ethno-religion, because it is based on that maternal lineage. So that's one aspect of it. And the other aspect of it is that it's not universal, it's exclusionary. So Christianity and Islam will both say, if you're a Muslim, all you have to do is say the Shahada, which is, God's the only God, Muhammad's his prophet, you're a Muslim. If you're a Christian, it's baptism, Eucharist, whatever, your sect is. It's one of the sacraments, or it's the baptism, or it's even saying Christ is my Lord and Savior, I'm saved forever. So they're universal. And they're not ethnic. So anybody could be Christian, anybody could be Muslim. Jews, however, have that ethnicity, and there's no conversion. And what's more, there's different prescriptions. For Jews, they have to follow the law. For non-Jews, they have the Noahide laws. And the non-Jews don't have the same expectations because Jews don't believe they're capable of agency. Like the religious Jews don't think they really have culpability in the same way, but to your point, not every Jew's religious. And even the religious Zion, or rather, the early Zionists were not religious Zionists. They were secular Zionists, which is a very important distinction. And so what I would say is the religion is a very important part of Jewish nationalism, Jewish culture, Jewish identity. Even, for example...
Well, that's why even the secular ones used it. Right?
Exactly.
Like,
Well, and Leo Strauss is a perfect example. Strauss was a follower of Baruch Spinoza, who said, the Old Testament's all fake. But Strauss said that, like, in Israel, they should teach the Old Testament because that's, like, who we are. There was, like, this deep contradiction that at once he was a secular humanist, but also he really believed in the importance of, like, Jewish tradition and sort of saying that you believe it, even if you don't really. And I would really say the real problem, to pinpoint it, it is something to do with Jewishness or Jewish nationalism, in the sense that it's this self-advocacy for a separate and distinct tribe. It's this competing identity that, like, let's say, for example, Israel is actually a project of American and European Jewry. It spawned from the organized Jewish groups and money and political influence of Jews in New York and Jews in London and Jews in continental Europe.
About that, sure.
And so to me, there's like a superstructure where Israel is just a part of a larger umbrella that is transnational, and what binds them together is that they have this Jewish identity.
This is one of those moments where the whole room starts smelling like bullshit, and everybody pretends not to notice. The second the great ally language comes out, you can already hear the gears turning. Bro, great ally is Washington code for shut up, send the money, and pretend this has nothing to do with lobbying, pressure, or strategic blackmail. And this is exactly why the Trump crowd got exposed. They spent years screaming about sovereignty, betrayal, and America getting ripped off. But when the ripoff is wrapped in an Israeli flag, half of them suddenly become the calmest little accountants on earth. Real inspiring stuff, real revolutionary, real alpha behavior from the same guys who cry about globalism every 5 minutes.
There was something from Bill Maher the other day. Bill Maher.
Oh, yeah, I saw this. This was crazy, dude. Yes.
But he kind of vindicated me in a certain way.
Now there are people who I wouldn't have here, like that little prick Nick Fuentes.
That is an unfortunate individual.
And maybe Dan, for that matter. He goes, and he's obviously a liberal, atheist, degenerate, pervert. I mean, he's as progressive as it gets. No, not religious in any way, shape, or form. And I don't even think he's a Jewish supremacist per se. However, he says, Hassan Piker, Nick Fuentes, they're all crazy. Dan Bilzerian's an exterminationist. Tucker and Canis, Nick Fuentes, they're terrible. He goes, the professors at Harvard, they say things that would make Hamas blush. He said, and Israel exists because anti-Semitism will always be around. And you sort of see how, like, there's a self-reinforcing thing where Like, Jews feel like they're under attack, so then they become more insular and more tribal. That's why we need Israel. And so that's sort of the tension that's always existed, is in an open society, can the Jews really be entrusted with tons of influence? Because they act as this group, and they're never going to see themselves as part of this propositional identity, like, well, I'm just an American, or I'm German, or because they're always going to say, yeah, but my grandma was Jewish and we were persecuted.
So that I agree with everything you said up until that last sentence.
Jew hatred isn't just acceptable now, it's cool. Celebrities love it and make it trendy. It's the new Che Guevara t-shirt. The Islamophobia is just as bad argument is simply a false equivalency. Can you name a Jewish professor who talks about Muslims the way they get talked about? No. Anti-Jewish crimes, hate crimes, now outpace anti-Muslim hate crimes 9-1. It's not a contest, and I'm certainly not saying do more of the other. I'm just saying these are the numbers.
This part should honestly embarrass every fake anti-war conservative in America. Because once you actually say the words out loud, I don't want to pay for their wars, I don't want to die for their wars, and I don't want our politics bent around another country's priorities, you realize how insanely normal that is. That should be the default position. But in Washington brain America, that sentence gets treated like you just walked into church and kicked over the altar. Why? Because it threatens the whole protection racket. And again, this is where MAGA looks weak. MAGA is vibes. MAGA is branding. MAGA is merch for dads who think every betrayal is secretly 4D chess. America First, in the more serious sense here, is saying, no, I actually mean it. Not just on the border, not just in speeches. On war too. On foreign aid too. On Israel too. That's why this split matters.
And first, we'll talk about how Colombia is losing its federal funding. This was a decision made by the Trump administration. Last week, it was announced that the Trump administration was reviewing $50 million in federal money that goes to Colombia. This weekend, the administration announced through the Department of Education that they are revoking $400 million in federal money from Colombia. The only reason they're revoking the money is because of pro-Palestine protests that took place on the campus. And this is a story from the New York Times. It says, quote, the Trump administration's abrupt withdrawal of $400 million in federal funding from Colombia cast a pall over at least 9 other campuses worried they could be next. The schools, a mix that includes both public universities and Ivy League institutions, have been placed on an official administration list of schools that the Department of Justice said may have failed to protect Jewish students and faculty. This week, the president threatened in a social media post to punish any school that permits illegal protests. Illegal protests. On January 30th, his 10th day in office, he signed an executive order on combating anti-Semitism, focusing on what he called anti-Jewish racism at leftist universities. Then, on February 3rd, he announced the creation of a multi-agency task force to carry out the mandate. The task force appeared to move into action quickly. After a pro-Palestine protest at Barnard College, a partner school to Columbia, on February 26th. 2 days later, the administration released its list of 10 schools under scrutiny, including Columbia, which was the site of large pro-Palestine encampments last year. It said it would be paying the schools a visit, part of a review process to consider whether remedial action is warranted. Then on Friday, announced it would be canceling millions in grants and contracts with Columbia. So they're sending out minders. We call them minders. You know, like mind your own business, do you mind? Minders, spies, hallmongers. The administration has created a task force to send out fucking spies to Columbia, Harvard. They're going to these campuses posing as students or faculty, and they are literally there like Randall in Recess, the cartoon with the checkboard. You know, they're there with their clipboard and their pen. Anti-Semitic, I hear an anti-Semitic trope. I overheard a Palestinian student criticizing Israel. And then they report back to the government. This is a government task force. They report back to the federal government in Washington, and then they revoke money that the school needs.
Bro, this is where the mask comes fully off. The second college kids start protesting Israel, all the free speech warriors turn into little bureaucratic goblins cheering on federal punishment. That's not a movement, that's a scam. These same morons spent the last decade crying about censorship, woke mobs, campus repression, speech codes, and the death of liberty. And then the second the wrong foreign policy subject comes up, they're suddenly begging for task forces, funding cuts, and political discipline. That's not conservatism. That's regime obedience with better branding. And if you want the simplest way to explain the America First versus MAGA split, it's this. America First says the government shouldn't be policing speech to protect another country's image. MAGA, as it exists now, folds into whatever keeps the donor class happy and the old boomer coalition from freaking out.
But with that, we're going to move on. We're going to get into our big featured story tonight, which is all about Thomas Massie. If you're here, you know what's going on. Today was Thomas Massie's primary election in Kentucky. So for those that don't know, this is the race to determine who will be the Republican nominee for that congressional seat. Now, Thomas Massie has won 7 consecutive elections since 2012. He's been in office. He has held this seat for 14 years. Okay? 14 consecutive years in his district. He is beloved by everybody, very popular. And it's never even been close in his district. If you look at the previous 2, 3, 4 elections, he has had primary challengers in the past. He always secures the nomination by 70, 80%. He's popular. But this time was a little bit different. This time, President Trump and the Israel lobby went all in with endorsements, with visits to the district, behind a primary challenger. They spent tens of millions of dollars in ad spending trying to primary Thomas Massie out of his seat. Can't beat him in the general with the Democrat. They're going to primary him, get a different Republican nominee to replace him so that Thomas Massie loses a seat, has to leave office, and then is effectively silenced. And this has been many, many months, maybe years in the making. Why did this happen? Why did Thomas Massie lose his seat? Well, it started a couple of years ago when Thomas Massie went very strongly against the Israel lobby. It started in April of 2024. Israel was begging the United States for a huge foreign aid package totaling $26 billion. And by the way, that's in addition to what we already do for them and give to them. At that point, we already had 2 carrier strike groups deployed in the Middle East defending them against Iran, which costs us tens of millions of dollars a day for a deployment like that. That's in addition to the $3.8 billion in foreign military financing we give them every year. On top of that, they wanted an additional $26 billion, which is massive. If we've given Ukraine $200 billion to fight Russia in a giant land war, we're giving Israel $26 billion to fight this tiny strip of land that's barely the size of Manhattan Island.
And I have Republicans who come to me and say, that's wrong what AIPAC is doing to you. Let me talk to my AIPAC person. By the way, everybody but me has an AIPAC person.
What does that mean, an AIPAC person?
It's like your babysitter, your AIPAC babysitter, who is always talking to you for AIPAC. They're probably a constituent in your district, but they are, firmly embedded in AIPAC. And
every member has something like this?
I don't know how it works on the Democrat side, but that's how it works on the Republican side. And when they come to DC, you go have lunch with them, and they've got your cell number, and you have conversations with them. So I've had
that's absolutely crazy.
I've had 4 members of Congress say, "I'll talk to my AIPAC person," and it's literally what we call them, my AIPAC guy.
The current polling in your race.
It's a single point lead for me. It's not very fluid. They've spent $10 million against me. And when I say they, I hope we get into they.
Yes.
And it's going to be close. It's just going to be, the result is going to be based on who turns out.
So it was 81% margin, 76, 75, full-on blowouts in the Republican primary in your district in Kentucky. And now it's within a couple of points and you could lose.
Correct.
And the difference is they have spent $10 million against you. So I don't think anyone would dispute that. That's the difference. The money poured into this race from outside of Kentucky is basically pushing you to the point of almost losing, and you may lose. Where'd that money come from?
Well, it didn't come from regular people. It's come from billionaires, and 95% of it, at least 95%, has come from the Israeli lobby.
There it is. This is the "we all know what's happening, but let's pretend we don't" section. You've got lobbying pressure, media pressure, party pressure, donor pressure, and political punishment. And somehow, you're still supposed to believe none of this has anything to do with Israel's place inside American politics. Bro, shut up. At a certain point, denying the machine just makes you look like a paid actor or a coward. And that's why so many of these clips feel vindicating to the America First crowd. Not because every messenger is polished, but because the official right spent so long lying, stalling, and doing little verbal gymnastics that the radioactive people started looking more honest by comparison. Not nicer, not smarter in every area, just less fake.
Listen, I would have come out sooner, but I had to call my opponent and concede, and it took a while to find Ed Galrein in Tel Aviv. You know, welcome to the most expensive congressional primary ever in the 250-year history of this country. It's not just the most expensive. This thing went on longer than Vietnam. It started 9 months ago, and they didn't even have a candidate, and they decided they want to take me out. Some of you are homegrown. I love all of you. I see how this is going to work. I'm going to have to not quit talking, or you'll start doing it. I want to thank the donors. Now listen, I'd name them all, but there's 50,000 donors, okay? We didn't lose this race because we didn't have enough money. You know, it is the most expensive race ever. I think when they add it up, right now they can count 35 million. I think when they add it up, it's going to be a lot more than that, because on our side, we know we spent more than 15 million. And we were able to go toe to toe. There was never a week that we got outspent more than 2-1 in this entire race. Once it got underway.
This is the payoff. The Tel Aviv line lands because it doesn't need a 40-minute policy breakdown. Everybody knows what it means the second they hear it. That's why it works. All the respectable conservatives spend years acting like this. Influence is some impossible mystery. Who can say? Maybe it's complicated, maybe it's just alliances, maybe it's just shared values. Yeah, okay. Then why does the money flood in the second somebody steps out of line? Why does a guy like Massey get politically firebombed for not clapping hard enough? Why is every America First guy eventually forced to choose between the slogan and the donor-approved foreign policy? MAGA wants to keep the fantasy alive. America First, in this Nick sense, is saying the fantasy is over. The movement got hijacked, the pressure is real, and the right is full of spineless little papermen who talk tough until Israel enters the room.
So they wanted us to shelve every other Republican priority, like the border, like January 6th tapes, everything else that Republicans had been talking about, to immediately and urgently vote on giving them a boatload more money so they could kill more kids, so they could genocide more people in Gaza, they could fight their war in Lebanon. So in 2024, Thomas Massey voted against the bill. A couple months later, Thomas Massey goes on Tucker Carlson's show and he exposes the influence of the Israel lobby, talks about AIPAC. He says that every Republican conference member, so that's every self-identified Republican in the House of Representatives and in the Senate, Massey says every single one of them has an AIPAC handler. AIPAC is the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. It is a pro-Israel PAC. They give money, or rather arrange for other individual donors to give money to candidates, and they're a single issue group. They're all about supporting Israel and opposing anti-Semitism. And so Massey said that every single Republican member has their own, a dedicated representative from this group, which could be called colloquially the Israel lobby, Israel lobby is an umbrella term for all the pro-Israel groups and individuals, but AIPAC is maybe emblematic of it. They're the archetypal Israel lobbying group. Massey says that every member of the House and Senate that's a part of the Republican Party has a dedicated rep from AIPAC, which talks to them and will ask for favors and talk to them on the phone, promising them contributions. And in exchange, these representatives are asked to sign on to letters periodically supporting Israel, told how to vote on pro-Israel legislation. And Thomas Massey said, I'm the only one that doesn't have a handler like that. And that's why they don't like me.
This past week has been very wistful for me. I've been reflecting in a way that I really maybe never haven't in my career, because I look at those screenshots from 7 years ago where all these things that are now being validated by the fact that everybody now seems to see the logic in them. And you know, events are proving how real they really are. 7 years ago, I was called insane and hateful and a horrible person, and I was just attacked by a lot of people. It was I was outnumbered and outgunned, and they just all joined in on it. They jumped me, and now all these years later, people are saying I was right, and it's inflicting a heavy price, I think, on many of the people that inflicted that on.